religion is spared from state gymnastics. Like, if any religion can and is most often used by the people in power to stay in power.
Yes, that's true.
It could be Kenya, it's Christianity, but other countries it's Islam that's being used to remain in power, right?
Yep.
Because religion is so it has the power to really capture people's minds and to really brainwash them into following certain people. No religion is immune, no matter how perfect it is. No religion is immune to being misinterpreted by people in power so they can remain in power.
I think it goes back to the religious education that people are given, because it's the people with, sorry to say, but people with less religious education are more likely to be susceptible to these things.
Yes.
And then there's also like a cult. Okay, like I'm seeing Joy Shekhar, but for example,
no, because we have a very different experience as Muslims, and that's why it's good to talk about this because I've always been in these conversations, and I'm like I've
but
also
the same
lived in
can
Kenya.
be said about Christian. Like, if you really followed the Christian values, you would not be doing certain things.
Yeah.
And if you do certain things, it's
But
because you
now
are not
see,
really
but now
Christian,
you see, But now you see, experientially, when you look at the countries where majority people are practicing Islam, for example, what is happening is that it's the very opposite, is that the people who are in leadership are telling people we are running away from Islam. It's the very opposite. If you look at Egypt, because I think that I think where people sometimes are slightly mistaken, they look at two countries. They look at Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that is a very, very small percentage of the Muslim world. When you look at the majority of the Muslim world, the most populous Muslim country is Indonesia. There's no people there practice freely. There's no religion in politics. When you look at, for example, a country like Egypt, totally
the religion is the opposition.
The religion is the opposition. It's a very opposite. If you want to get leadership, you go and say, me by the way, you Islam wache kai kando. How are young Muslims in Kenya redefining the role of the masjid, imams, ulamas in the face of injustice? Are Gen Z Muslims also experiencing a crisis in faith like our Christian counterparts?
That's an interesting question. I'll premise this by saying I haven't been in Kenya since 2024, but let me just speak from my perspective.
See you Jana.
Okay, since June 25th, I have not been in a post-June 25th Kenya. I'll premise like that.
Okay.
I would say that the tradition of Christianity being intertwined with the state is far more extensive compared to Islam being intertwined with the state in a way that it ends up oppressing people. So we don't have that.
We don't have that
baggage. That baggage of our religion is used to, mobilize us in a bad way. I would say, from a religious perspective, I would say we are calling or we are thinking of the principles. Like, in Islam, we say that when you kill one person, it's as if you've killed all of mankind.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So murder is a very grave sin and crime to be committing. And we also say that when you see injustice, if you should do something about it. But if you cannot do something about it, say something about it. And if you cannot rebuke it verbally, you should at least rebuke it in your heart.
In your heart, yeah.
For me, those are the things that I go to when I think about the relationship between religion and protest. The other thing that I think we should highlight is that, for example, in the mosque, it's very different from the church. So you would never have, there's no hierarchy of like when your politician comes, you give him the front seat, you do blah, blah, blah. There's no that hierarchy. You have to give them time to speak. It doesn't exist. They're a normal person. And mind you, like in a mosque, there are virtually no chairs. So they're sitting on the floor with us.
Yeah.
So with that, there leaves very, very little room for them to misuse religion in other ways. But I would say the opportunity is that our imams, our scholars, etc., should be a bit more political, but with caution, which is to say that I don't want to see my imam like go out there and tell me vote for so and so. No, but come out with clear rulings on what's happening today politically and say, look, the killing of young people on the streets, that's a no. for me, I know I felt really sad during the end femicide protests that happened, I think in 2024.
Yeah.
Because I was seeing
Last
Muslim
year.
women on the streets, but I was not seeing the imams on the streets. I was not seeing let's not talk about like normal people, but like religious scholars. I didn't even see them talk about it. And we were afraid because why? Because especially last year, there were a lot of LGBTQ people in the streets, right? But when it comes to activism, you can't be an isolationist on issues that you align in. Go and sit with those LGBT. You're fighting the same person. You're fighting the same systems. Go and sit with them and say that, hey, killing people is wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with them 100%. It just means that we need to come together on this. We can't refuse to go to end femicide protests because there are going to be LGBTQ people there. I refuse that. We can't refuse to go to maandamano or to talk about let's say Ojwang or anti-Ruto. We can't refuse that because there are people who are in those crowds who we don't align in. You will never align 100% with everyone. And as long as, of course, we're not telling you go align with murderers and thieves, but there's some issues where we should be willing to work together on.
You know, I think
You bring in a very interesting perspective, in the sense that we have the opposite problem. The opposite problem in the sense that and this is just not me, and I'm glad there's someone else who's saying this. So from
are
the
you sure
Muslim
you
side-
guys didn't rehearse?
So from the Muslim side, no rehearsals.
No, Ali,
rehearsals.
you're not just asking. I have to ask because Ali brings
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying you, but Ali brings these things.
Yes.
Ali, because he's a one-sided. What is it? Should I say Muslim activist or voice?
No, you see.
In the studio. In the studio, basically.
Yes, in
So,
the studio,
yes.
I'm the only
Yes,
solo Muslim
correct.
voice. And in a lot of these Kenyan spaces, I always find myself as the only Muslim. So there's certain things that people talk about. I'm like, okay, you're experiencing it as a Christian in Kenya, and I empathize, but that's not what we're experiencing. So like, for especially that crisis in theology or crisis in the faith, it's not, they're not saying that there are no Muslims who are at crisis, but it's not, it's really
It's not on Christianity levels.
it's not on Christianity
Yeah.
levels. Yeah, and then the other thing that Sheila mentioned is that the other opposite problem that we have is that our ulamas, they stay away from these controversial issues. They stay away from this. One thing that I thank God for, and I think it's also because of the way a mosque is set up. A mosque is a 7-day-a-week operation from 4 o'clock in the morning to 9, 10 p.m.
Yes.
7 days a week.
Correct.
So there's no room for because when it's prayer time, and
Correct.
whoever got there first, it doesn't matter whether it's a
Yeye
president
ndio agambele,
or a person.
alafu nini,
there
yes.
are no
And
chairs.
then, yes.
There are no chairs. There's
You
no
line up,
hierarchy.
yeah.
So I think that has been a protection for us in disguise, because a Muslim politician, even his first instinct is not the mosque. And the mosque is the last place.
You'll see them in a church before you see them in a
Yes,
mosque campaigning.
correct.
And that's
There's
why
gaps in the churches.
that's why I really rebuke politicians like Nyali MP Muhammad Ali when I see them go doing in a church what they would never
Never do
dare
in a
go do in a
Dare.
mosque.
They would never
Yeah.
dare.
They
to do
would
it.
never
dare to do it.
They
in
would
a
never
mosque,
even
yes.
dream about
Yeah,
it.
Ali, you
So
know-
I really feel bad when I see these Muslim politicians go in churches and abuse
Causing havoc.
the worship time, because
Yes.
like when it's
Yes.
worship time,
Yes.
that's a sacred time, whatever
Correct.
religion you're in. So you have this, that you're not supposed to do this, but then where unaenda kwa kanisa, you start giving a speech during worship time. To me, like the Muslim politicians who do that, and they would never dare
It
do
would never
that.
work.
The car, how they would be
in a
given
mosque.
audience
Yeah.
in a mosque.
But then
So
you also have to take into consideration
audience.
which churches they do this in, and you also have to take into consideration what is the basis of that church being created. Religion and politics have gone hand in hand since time immemorial. We cannot pinpoint a specific time whereby politics and religion hazikukua. Ottoman Empire, when people are looking for the Holy Grail, all of that was kings, leaders using the church in certain ways, and the church manipulating leaders and like putting on kings on how they're going to manipulate and lead the world. It's always been a complex power sharing thing between those two institutions. Now, the churches that have been formed right now in Kenya as political vehicles.
Yeah, they were funded by politicians.
Those churches were funded by money
But
from
let's be fair and
politicians,
say the
and
Catholic
they were
Church
and they were
don't.
and they were used. They were funded by politicians, and they were used as a way of the politician bringing laundering money or whatever it is they were doing, or even just building that church. Ali, you are a pastor. You are charismatic. You can talk to people. But I know for you to reach certain numbers of people, you need a certain amount of look. You need a bigger church. You need more outreach. You need everything. Your congregation can't fund that for you. I come in, I'm a politician, and I donate to you. And when you preach to your people and you tell your people, unaona vile kanisa yetu imegrow, ni Mika. Ni vile Mika ndo ametusaidia. Mika ndo mwenye Mungu ametutumia kwetu akuja tusaidie. Your congregation is going to be thankful to me as their savior, of saving their church, of building their church, improving it, and making it big. Thus, by proxy, they become my voters.
Wow.
Like that is my base by strength, because when they think that huyu jamaa akitoka kanisa yetu inakufa, huyu jamaa akitoka alifikisha kanisa yetu hapa, right? Anafanyanga hivi through nini? Tukienda kwa church, tukienda church kulia, tuko na mashida zetu, pastor anamuita na tufanyia harambee na tusaidie. Like undo Mungu work through jamaa.
You know, it is so sad that that people are using churches for this purpose. I think what has also protected us as Muslims is that, first of all, you cannot just give someone money and then tell them nendo kafungwe, because even with most mosques you will never even know who built it.
Yeah.
You'll never know who. There's no such thing as owning a mosque.
Sorry.
And then the other thing is that you cannot just be charismatic and go become, you know, like a religious leader, an ulama or an imam, because there's a barrier of Muslims have this culture of memorizing the Quran. So if you're even a quarter schooled, you cannot go speak during a Friday sermon, because ukiwata kwa mosque, like if the imam, for example, in reading a verse of the Quran makes a mistake, you know, like even a 9-year-old will correct him. Like even a vowel that's said incorrectly, because there's this culture that we've had. So it's kind of like a self-check and balance. So it's very difficult to call Ali ati Ali or charismatic, we sasa nenda ukaongoze ile msikiti, you know, like it will, utasimama kwa hiyo mimbar, watu wanakawa na kuangalia na
umesema
mimbar.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I actually think though that no religion is spared from state gymnastics. Like if any religion can and is most often used by the people in power to stay in power.
Yes, that's true.
It could be Kenya, it's Christianity, but other countries it's Islam that's being used to remain in power, right?
Yep.
Because religion is so it has the power to really capture people's minds and to really brainwash them into following certain people. No religion is immune, no matter how perfect it is. No religion is immune to being misinterpreted by people in power so they can remain in power, no matter how tight it is.
Let me hear what Sheila has to say about that.
It is the only beacon of hope for so many people.
Okay, but let me hear what Sheila...
and that is why you will find that there are some people who will use the teachings of religions and the words of religion to push for a certain narrative, to push for a certain ideology, to inflict, because depending on the hopes that specific target audience is hoping to look for, they will exploit that
hope.
They will exploit that hope easily through that religion that is dominant over there, or that religion that they know, if we go through this way, we can be able to control a certain narrative. And that is why I said when I spoke earlier, religion and power, or religion and governance, have been married together since time immemorial. Like every historical event that has happened has always had an intermarriage between the two. Be it be the time of the Khan, be it be the time of Henry the Great, be it the time of what's his name, the time of the Ottoman Empire. Regardless of what power was controlling the world at that particular time, there was some religion married now. Even right now, our supreme leader in this country and evangelicals do F together.
Let me hear what Sheila has to say about this, because I have a slightly different take.
Yeah.
But let me first hear what Sheila has to say.
I think it goes back to the religious education that people are given, because it's the people with, sorry to say, but people with less religious education are more likely to be susceptible to these things.
Yes.
And then there's also like a cult. Okay, like I'm seeing Joy Shekhar, but for example,
No, because we have a very different experience
Yeah.
as Muslims, and that's why it's good to talk about this, because I've always been in these conversations, and I'm like, I've
But
also
the same
lived in
can
Kenya.
be said about Christian. Like, if you really followed the Christian values, you would not be doing
before-
certain things.
yeah.
And if you do
Okay.
certain things, it's
But
because
now
you are
you
not
see-
really
but now you
Christian,
see-
you know?
But now you see, experientially, when you look at the countries where majority people are practicing Islam, for example, what is happening is that it's the very opposite. Is that the people who are in leadership are telling people we are running away from Islam.
yeah.
It's the very opposite. If you look at Egypt, because I think I think where like people sometimes are slightly mistaken, they look at two countries. They look at Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that is a very, very small percentage of the Muslim world. When you look at a
That's true.
majority of the Muslim world, the most populous
Indonesia.
Muslim country is Indonesia. There's no people there practice freely. There's no
Yeah.
religion in politics. When you look at, for example, a country like Egypt, like totally
The
they say
religion is the opposition.
opposite. Yeah, the religion is opposition. It's a
Yeah.
very opposite. If you want to get leadership, you go and say, me by the way, you Islam wache kaikando. If you look at Tunisia, it is a very, very
But
opposite.
the same thing can be said about
Yeah.
Christian, that there is countries that have successfully been able to have prosperous countries, even though, the main message
Well,
is
Europe.
that
Which
the
country?
main message is, I don't have one at the top of my head.
No,
but the
Europe,
message,
no.
the point
For
is
her,
that
countries, example of
religion
countries for
can
her.
be used. Religion can be used as a tool
Okay,
to
I
control.
get you.
It
Yeah,
can. It's not
yes.
always is, but it can. be
That is
used
right.
as a way
But
to
what we
control
like
people.
pointing out is that yes, religion can be used and misused, but what I like pointing out is that the Muslim experience is entirely different, and that's where I premised this with the interchangeability of Christianity to mean religion. It's a very different. It's a very, very different experience, both at a personal level, and also because at a personal level we don't have a crisis as much as I see with the average person in
But
Christianity.
Ali,
So with the leaders, they are very scared of actually being tagged as a Muslim. It's a very opposite problem we have. Mika.
Ali, so you mentioned something. Let's even look at it on the Christianity part of it, right? And that is why I said, ukiangalia and religions is usually, there are some churches which have been built specifically, purposely for politics. And that is a tactic in Kenya. And if you look at it compared to the broader religion, the broader church, the major churches in Kenya are two: Anglican and Catholic. Catholic is the biggest church in Kenya, alafu Anglican. Alafu tuko na 10 million evangelical, there's a name they have. Prosperity Gospel Churches, ndio? Hiyo ndio zinazoitwa. Prosperity Gospel, like hizo gospel churches, right? Tuko na million, mingi. Right? We have a lot of them. And those are the ones that actually are used specifically by this politician. For the mere fact that if we prey on people's hope, and the biggest hope is poverty in Kenya. Shida watu wengi Kenya ni poverty, si ati nini, na si ati poverty ati ile ati naishi kwa nini, hapana. Kenya kila mtu angekuwa anaweza ku afford kanyumba kake na watoto wasome,
That would be enough for most people, yeah.
Yeah,
People are not asking for much.
Yeah, watu watake kwa mabilionea ama sijua mamilionea manini, hapana. Comfort, basic needs. If people could get basic needs, we'd be a very happy country. Now, if you use opulence as a means of distraction, you'll get a lot of people in a place where poverty is there. That is why we glorify thieves in that country.
So
tunaona hiyo tunataka kuiona, na hizo churches zinakuja na hiyo. Hizo churches zinakuja na pastor na drive Benz, sijui anafanya nini. Mtu anaona hapa nikishika dini vizuri hapa, alafu najua kuna wale wana recruit wangu, unaona njia yake usiona moyo yake Mungu yani, like you're praying for wealth. Umesahau, when you pray for wealth, God gives you work. Akupeangi wealth, anakupeaga kazi. Ukifanya kazi utabuildio wealth. Lakini juu unaombea wealth, unafikiria Mungu anakupatia pesa, auoni hizo kazi anakufungulia hapo, unadharau kazi ndogo ndogo juu unaweza grow. So in yourself, wewe mwenyewe, your beliefs are wrong. So you'll be swayed and you'll be used in all ways that you can be used.
Okay, aya, sawa. Acha tusome some comments up as we are coming to close to wrapping up. Kenyan Diaspora anasema, I love this Gen Z energy. They are not just praying for change, they are voting, organizing, and calling it out. Kenyan Diaspora further says, unlike older generation, Gen Z doesn't see faith and activism as mutually exclusive, while past generations were made to believe that speaking out against injustice was somehow rebellious or wrong. Gen Z isn't buying that, and I love to see it. Skylar Roberts anasema, Clangelical sounds right. And then Kenyan Diaspora says, the beauty of it is that these older tribal generation politicians don't have a software update for Gen Z. They have no idea how to deal with them. You can see it in the streets. They are not shaken by tear gas or abductions. The government is at wit's end trying to figure out these kids. Like I said, there's no patch, no update, no manual for these generations. And then Apa Sasha Spice Africa nasema, to be honest, I admire the Muslim ways since I started living in Zanzibar. I'll give an example by something I've observed, although I can't say the same for Mombasa, but I can say it for Zanzibar. Like the way most Christians behave on the beaches with Wazungus, you will rarely see a Muslim girl with a Mzungu on the beach. Also, they build as a community, unlike us. I know those won't sit well with many, but their ways are a bit better than us Christians. All in all, I dropped religion because of the hypocrisy in religion. Muslims have their weaknesses, but nothing compared to Christians. And then Washeke anasema, and the Muslim world have had some of the most progressive democracies with women leaders. America has never. And then Apa Kenyan Diaspora anasema, Joy, name one country where distancing yourself from Christianity has ever been considered a smart political strategy. Just one. And then Washeke is giving examples of Muslim countries with women leaders as Pakistan, Bangladesh, and then and I think also Indonesia. Indonesia has also had a woman leader. And then Kenyan Diaspora anasema, unlike in many Muslim majority countries in the West and in Christian nations like Kenya, wearing Christianity on your sleeve is actually the smart political move, which is what I think I want people to understand. I think with Muslim countries, if you try to wear, like Islam on the sleeve, and then people put you to that,
you'll be called radical.
People put you to that standard of leadership
and
in a Muslim
fail.
country, and you fail, it's gonna be it's quite the opposite. Like everybody will fashion themselves.
It's not an advantage.
It's not
for
an
you.
advantage.
It's actually a
And you'll-
disadvantage. Yeah.
You'll never be the savior in an like, for example, in Saudi Arabia, why they're moving away from religion is
Yes.
because they know that and they're trying to de-Islamize their populations, that if someone comes and says they are the Mahdi or the savior, everybody is going. Everybody, the army, everybody, kila mtu anaenda.
Unajua,
The loyalty.
funny thing-
Make
The funny thing about-
ngoja Sheila
No,
malize.
sorry,
Yeah.
Sheila, nimaliza,
So
sorry.
in that religious setting, the loyalty is not to that king or bin Salman, whomever. The loyalty
Yes.
will be to whatever religious figure emerges.
Yes. So I think, you know, like it's
I have a question for you guys, but finish.
yes. Okay, you go ahead and ask your question first.
No, I want to make a. Let me.
Mika, go ahead, and then Uno.
No, for me, my question was like, it's good you brought that Saudi Arabia aspect on it, because right now we are seeing a crisis that is happening that can cause World War III, and in that crisis, in the middle of that crisis, there's somebody who's a religious leader of a very huge number of Muslims, very huge number of Muslims,
Yes.
and this is somebody who, if let's say, for example, they decided to take him out,
Ayatollah.
yes,
Yeah.
are we going to say that at this point there will be consequences whereby politics and religion will merge because he's being taken out politically?
That will be one of the biggest blunders that America will ever make if they take out, you know, like the Ayatollah. And remember, the Ayatollah is the spiritual leader of the Shia Muslims. The Shia Muslims, they're like about 15% of the entire Muslim population in the world. But if they do that, and the Shias and Sunnis, there's been rivalries dating centuries, dating 1400 years ago from when after the Prophet died. But if they dare make that mistake, that is a point when the Sunnis and the Shias will come together. It hasn't happened for a very long time, and I think that's part of the reason why, you know, like people are trying to advise against it. If they make that mistake, that's when these two groups will come together, and when that happens, I think, you know, like things are gonna get very ugly. Because look at one thing I have to give respect for the Iranian leadership, whether it's a spiritual leadership or whether it's a political leadership. They are the only ones who stood up, you know, like when Palestine was being bombarded. Because look at all these Muslim countries. Look at all of them.
I've asked you this question.
Yes, look at all of them. Cowards. Jordan,
I am disturbed.
Saudi Arabia, all of them cowards. But now you see, part of the problem is that, see how America likes promoting democracy in Africa, but they're very comfortable dealing with dictators in the Middle East. You know why? Do you know why? It's because if they try the democracy experiment in the Middle East, you know who's gonna win? The people who are gonna win are the religious people.
Yeah.
And we saw it where? In Egypt. When they tried that experiment, Muhammad Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood is the one who won the election. So America did not like that. So they took him out and they brought back a military dictator. See, because of saying Hosni Mubarak ametolewa because he's a dictator. So they put democracy and they thought they would get their guy in there. So in Muslim countries operate very differently. If they do democracy, all these paper tiger leaders that you see in the Middle East, you know, like the Mohammed bin Salmans and all these kings in Sijui, Qatar, and if they make a mistake of doing democracy, it will be very shocking. It's very different, and I think part of the difference is what Sheila was pointing out. There is no personal crisis of the faith. We know, like, most of those Muslim countries are led by people who are corrupt. Most of them are planted by the West, because these Middle Eastern borders, African borders, were created in the Berlin Conference. Middle East, that was in 1884. Middle East borders were created after the end of the World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell and the Khilafah ended, and these borders were made in an agreement called Sykes-Picot. So all these tiny countries you're seeing, Bahrain, Qatar
was supposed to be split between the French and the British.
Yeah, they were split between the French and the British. So this actually, they are in the image of Europeans. They are not representing the aspirations of their own people, which is very different. That's why ukiangalia hizo countries, you know, like America is happy to keep those leaders there. So they try to do the same thing in Iran, where they put the Shah, but there was a rebellion and there was a revolution that brought in the Ayatollah in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini. So now what they're trying to do they're now trying to reverse.
Regime change.
They're trying to reverse this again.
So I have a question. So
Yes.
the Ayatollah, right? I have 2 Iranian dear friends, and one thing I think I've learned from them is I think the best people to talk to about their countries are the people from those countries. And I think social media has a lot of information out there. And I was shocked because once I spoke to them, and we had very different, and of course
Perspectives.
their opinions matter more than mine because they
Yeah.
have experience, right?
Yeah.
Let me finish
Yeah.
on that. So I talked to them about what's going on in their country, and I was concerned, and I said, I'm really sorry, you're being bombed by this other country. And they told me, we're actually very happy that our country is being bombed because we want a regime change. We want this man to be taken out. So according to them, they believe that Islam colonized their old cultures, that they were not Islam before the Islam colonization, and they want those people taken out because they've been responsible for so many human right abuses. So I talked to them, and I was very surprised because according to me and according to my information, Israel is the aggressor. They should not be bombing Iran.
Yeah.
But according to these people, and these are, one of them is young. She thinks she's in her 30s, and the other one is in her 60s. They're excited. They're like, we can't wait for a regime change. So I think the point is, I think connecting with the people from these countries, more than 1, more than 2, more than 10, to really get the other side of what the people think. They're the people that have lived in these regimes for over 40 years.
Yeah.
They know a lot more than what we get from reading a few tweets that are trending on the internet.
Yeah, so in Iran, there's 2 schools of thoughts. My immediate superior, who I've been reporting to for the last 10 years, is Iranian. So we talk a lot. So there's 2 groups of Iranians. There are those who came to the US when the Shah fell in 1979, and I compare them to the Cubans in Miami who came before
After Castro.
before
Fidel.
Castro, when
Before
Fidel
Castro.
took over.
Yeah, when Fidel,
When Fidel took over, and they've always been against him. But there's another set of Cubans that you'll talk to that will speak very nostalgically about Fidel Castro.
Right.
So it's the same thing. It's the same thing in Iran. Because the Shah was imposed by a Western power, and then after things got so hot, he was overthrown. Then so with the Islamic Republic, it was just going back to where it was before the Shah came in. So of course the people who lived under the Shah were there was a bit more liberal values allowed. Most of them left and came to the United States, and they've lived here since then. So if you go to the mosques and speak to now Iranians who lived under Ayatollah, they will tell you something entirely different. So you'll find these different experiences. And then the other point you brought up.
Who do you think has a more valid opinion? I think it is the people who are currently existing
Yes.
in the country, because the people that left, they're frozen in time, as we were talking,
Yes,
right?
and I'm talking to you about people who, like the people we see in the mosques. These are people who were living there maybe until 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
They'll tell you something entirely different. Now, you talked about a previous religion that was there before, and the Persians are very proud people before Islam, because Islam is only slightly over 1400 years. Even Arabs were not Muslims, they were also pagans, and they had other different beliefs.
religions.
They used to worship idols and everything. So it was new, in all these spaces. So the Persians used to be people who worshipped fire. Zoroastrians, wanaitwa Majus. Yeah, they used to worship fire. So that was their ancient religion, and they're actually Zoroastrians until today.
Yeah.
They're still there until today, and they are very proud people. They're very proud of their identity. So yeah, so those people they are still there. They're in existence. And what happened at that particular time? Because I also tell people in Kenya, people look also, there's this conflation of Christianity and Islam. In Kenya, Islam has been practiced from, I think, the 7th century. The oldest mosques that you can find in Lamu They were built in the 7th century. That's a little bit slightly 200 years after Prophet Muhammad died. So it's been there for centuries. So Islam is fairly new, even in the Arab world, like when you speak in the grander scheme of things. And this is why I say, like it's sometimes also very important to talk to people like the way you are doing it, and also get these different perspectives.
Very important.
Yeah,
It's very
if you talk to
important.
Iranians, they'll give you different things. The one thing that I'm worried about because I've talked to my boss a lot, this has been very deep in her. She was actually having a wedding for the daughter this weekend, and she was telling me, the mood is not even
right.
there because of the countries being bombed. What I told them to be careful about, as you're celebrating seeing Ayatollah being assassinated, remember Libya. Remember Afghanistan.
Yes.
All these places, those dictatorial or whatever you want to call them leaders were taken out. I mean, there's not even one example where everywhere America has touched, it has turned to dust. And that's the one thing I tell them, keep thinking about it. Yes, maybe he's not the best leader. Maybe he doesn't, maybe there's oppression in this, but think about it. Would you rather this or would you rather Libya? Libya is right now being controlled by warlords.
Pirates, terrorists.
Yes, it's being controlled by warlords. Wanasema hii Beltsville, hii ni yangu. Ukitaka kuingia hapa, if you want anything, you have to talk to me, and you have, like Tuaregs, like protecting you around the area. So that's something that people need to think about critically. Let's be honest, America is not going to liberate anyone.
No.
They're not doing this for liberation
No,
reasons.
absolutely not.
We already have experience in Iraq. We have experience in Afghanistan.
Somalia.
We have experience in Somalia. We have experience in Libya. We know that there's no liberation. Before to Sahau, because your time inaenda, 2027 elections.
No, before you go there, I had a question, and I wanted to
Yes.
ask. And I know
Yeah.
this is gonna touch, because during the Senate hearing, when the Murkomen,
Sifuna.
Kanja,
Yeah.
and
Amin. Yeah.
did Amin swear on a Quran?
Yes.
Those people have been
Yeah.
lying under oath.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's
Yes.
I know
Yes.
I know with Kanja and
Yes.
Murkomen,
Yes.
standard Christians lie. That one I'm convinced. I'm not even going to bat an eyelid.
Yeah. No.
For me, it is the reverence with which, with respect to my brother here, it's the reverence with which, like, there are certain things I've learned, being a Muslim.
Yeah.
There are certain things about like lying, or like if interest or riba, like it's what do you call it? It's
Haram.
haram.
Yeah.
Such things. Just even lying. A guy swear and then lies.
But this is what we were talking about. Any religion can be used
No,
when
no,
it
it
comes
is-
to the
yeah.
corridors of power.
It is, but
Nothing is out of the
I think
out of
for me,
cards.
yes, I'm in that Christian space, but still, it's the fact that a religion that I really look at to be very, like accurate, pinpoint, not there's no wishy-washy, like it's like, okay, these guys or whatever.
Let me tell you.
But I could be wrong.
Human beings,
I know,
though.
you
Human
know,
beings.
Wha-
It
one
doesn't
thing-
matter.
Kenya,
One thing I want Joy to understand, one unfair advantage, I call it unfair sometimes, that Muslims have, is that we do not debate about what the Quran says. There's no debate about it. Even amongst, people who disagree on so many different things, even amongst people who are not following. So, for example, if you see me drinking at Swahili Village, I'm not going to come back and say that, nimekunywa kidogo tu, so it's okay. So I'm going to be drinking, and I will know that I'm doing something that's wrong. I think that's one big fundamental difference, where there's no debate that you can drink kidogo, ama you can
Cherry picking.
There's
There's no for cherry picking.
There's no cherry picking. So like when you're doing
You're
it,
black or white.
It's black or white. Like
Yeah.
if, for example, you're engaging in sexual shenanigans before you get married, you're doing it, but there's no such thing at it's okay, nini. You know, so
You're
that's
taking the car for a test drive.
So that's one big fundamental difference.
Stop laughing.
That's one big fundamental difference that we have. And another big fundamental difference that we have, if you've been brought up in even, let's say, an average Muslim household in America and even in the US, you know, because I've lived in the US long enough now, you see these things being practiced. The reason why it's very easy to find a 9-year-old fasting during Ramadan is because they're seeing other people doing it.
Right,
So,
right.
And you're seeing people praying 5 times a day. And that's not going to make you perfect, because I know there's sometimes this
Absolutely
argument
not.
that comes
Absolutely
that
not.
imagine this guy was praying and then the other day nilimwona na katia dem. By the way,
No.
by the way, you know, like it's not going to make you perfect, but at a personal level, there's always a constant check and balance. You know, like kama nimeplan kukutukana, there's always a constant check and balance that I'm having, you know, like 5 times a day. I have to go back and I know this sounds like a very foreign concept in a world that has become so anti-religion. It sounds like a very foreign concept, but every time, and that's the reason why, unaona sasa vitu kama riba, these are things you hear being talked about from when you're very young. So like even when I'm going to a bank, I'm trying to find out which accounts do you have that have no interest.
Free.
Yeah, and part of it is because of things that you see, is because of experiential things that you see being done.
It's environment you've
Even
grown up in.
I'll give you an
Simple.
example. Even wearing a hijab, you know, because you grew up, you know, like seeing your mother, your aunt doing it, and you started doing it yourself. Because it's not, a lot of people tend to think there's the only countries that compel women to wear hijab, maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe and Iran. Muslim countries, you're free. You know, you go to Turkey, you go to Indonesia, you're free to do it, but you'll still find women doing that. So that's just one fundamental difference I like pointing out, because I think there's this confusion that you know, like, and I say this very empathetically, the crisis that's there within the average Christian, within the Christian faith, is also there amongst Muslims. What I've seen from my experience is that the older we grow, like, and I'm seeing this with my cousins, even people like, for example, who never used to wear hijab when they were younger, I get very surprised. And nyumbani, as they grow older, it's quite an
unusual
opposite
scene.
It's an opposite effect. And that's why I like pointing out there's a difference. And I think it's important we talk about this, because there's sometimes a tendency to assume that this experience that Christians are going through, both at a personal level and at a level of where politics is being infused, is the same experience that Muslims are going through. So I think that's just the
I
one
have
thing.
a fun fact.
Yes, fun fact.
It's not very fun. It's just a fact. Did you guys see that his name is Amin, right? The DCI.
Yeah.
Used to be he was a witness for the ICC cases in 2008, and I think he was one
I
of
did
the
not know
witnesses. They have a picture. You know how they used to wear the headphones? He
yeah.
was there. He was one of the witnesses, and I think he was one that flipped and did not do a testimony against the accused. And I think this is more of like a thank you, you know, situation.
Yes. Yeah.
But they found the picture of him with the headphones at the International Criminal
Wow,
Court.
that must have been Gen Z sleuths.
And it was trending, yeah.
Another interesting thing, if you look at Muslim majority counties in Kenya, if you're religious, you will never be elected. Look at all the Muslim majority count. It's very opposite. Look at all Muslim majority counties. If you're the religious one, you will never get elected. It's very opposite in northern Nigeria, because I've been studying the systems in northern Nigeria. Because northern Nigeria has 36
It's
states,
Muslim, yeah.
18 are Muslims and 18 are Christian. It's very the opposite in the northern Nigeria. In northern Nigeria, out of the 18 governors, and I don't know whether that's the same fact until now, 5 of them are what you call Hafiz. A Hafiz is someone who's memorized the whole Quran. That is something very difficult. It's something very difficult, and by the time someone is getting to that point, but in Kenya, it's quite the opposite. If you're a Hafiz and you're in one of those Muslim, no one will ever vote for you. So it's a very
interesting.
opposite.
I wouldn't
it's a
even
very
say no
opposite
one
dynamic.
would vote for you. I would say the amount of contradictory things that are contradictory to your faith you would have to do to get to the
To get-
position where
yes.
someone can elect
Exactly,
you
yeah.
are a lot.
So it's very opposite. Ukiangalia northeastern counties, coast, UB, even jaribu tu kusema, like kuleta mambo, which
Joho is not Muslim.
he is.
He is, but
But not really.
Is Joho an ulama?
He's not religious.
He's not.
He's
That's
not
the
a
key.
religious leader.
There you go.
Okay,
That's
okay.
yes.
Ulama.
No,
kwanza.
ulama, no. The other one, the guy who has memorized the Quran.
Hafiz. Yeah.
Joho
He's
Hafiz.
not.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, and you see the thing is,
What
and-
if he was, though?
yeah,
I
and
don't
that's
know.
why I like talking about this, because it's a very opposite experience that we are seeing, whereby there's some religious people who now in Mombasa wanaenda wanaambiwa we basi we ndo utaongoza kwa uadilifu, but yeye mwenyewe
They don't
anakataa,
want to. Yeah.
anasema like I don't want to do that. So there's a very opposite experience. Are Gen Z's gonna vote in 2027?
Absolutely.
Because
I never voted.
Mulikata.
Siku vote.
Mbona
I
ulikata?
was a political sleeping princess before.
Eh?
Political.
Say it in English and don't add the princess there.
We used to call them sleeping giants in high school. You know, when you weren't performing well, and the teacher would always be, "You're a sleeping giant. You're a sleeping
Hao ni wale
giant."
ma sleeping beauty walikuwa nangoja Prince
What?
Charming akuja wapicha mabusu.
I was a sleeping beauty in terms
Political
of
sleeping
political.
princess.
I was a political sleeping princess before I got radicalized a year ago, and for me, it was all just so noisy because it just all felt like it was so much mediocrity, and I was just not interested in the kind of mediocrity that I was seeing on the internet.
So
But
what
then
changed?
you quickly realize the political is personal very quickly. The things that you're experiencing every day.
Yes.
The reason I wake up and I don't have a job as an educated 20-something-year-old is not because God hates me or it's because I made a mistake, 1 or 2 or 3 mistakes. It's because the country isn't working. The country isn't working. Institutions are not working. So you start to realize the reason you don't have a job, the reason your parents are struggling, the reason there's so much classism in Kenya is because of the government. And for me, I think the turning point when you stop being a consumer and start being an active participant of politics in Kenya. For me, it was seeing the Gen Zs that passed away and their dates on the gravestone.
Yes.
It said 1999, 2000, 2001,
that was
2002.
painful.
Seeing that it kind of put a switch in my mind of, okay, it's time for us to really be serious, because here are people my age who went on the streets, they paid with their lives, and they're not here anymore. So it was a
Wow.
wake up call.
Okay.